My name is Hannah Brown, and I write for the Jerusalem Post. And I'm excited to be moderating a virtual conversation with director Ran Tal, whose film What If is premiering at this year's festival. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Hannah. It's a pleasure.
So, Ran, I think we've always met on the phone. I don't think I've actually met you, but I've really liked many of your movies. So over the years. So I'm just going to start with the most obvious, most basic question that you could imagine, which is why Ehud Barak? I mean, you've done, because so many of your other movies, you take some huge place or institution and you kind of break it down. And, the people are not famous in really your other movies, right? I mean, Children of the Sun, it's it's home movies of people most of the people you never get their name, right? And the museum, the Israel Museum movie, I don't think you even introduced the director of the museum. He's there, but he's just part of the mix, right? What's it called? Gardens of Eden?
Yeah.
Is that the title in English? Also, it's just, who you come across in this beautiful park, but here you're focusing on one, Israeli politician, former prime minister, world famous person. So why did you decide to do that?
To be honest, I'm not sure I know why. I think I was interested in history. I always interested in history and the place of leaders, a place of people in the course of history. And it was one day I came across with Berlin, very famous small book speaking about Tolstoy, the fox and the Akipot Vashual, the fox.
The fox and the hedgehog.
Yeah. And it was very shocking for me to read that. And I figured out that maybe it would be very interesting for me to go to somebody in Israel to speak about the same ideas that I read in Berlin, a very small book speaking about Tolstoy that published in the 19th century, 69, I think, War and Peace that's happened in, the war in Russia in the beginning of the 19th century, 1812. And I felt that maybe Israel is a good place to speak about those issues, and because it's such a chaotic place with a lot of really, if you go into Tolstoy, the part that is speak about history and the role of leaders in history, it's very interesting. And the way Berlin wrote about it. And I felt that maybe Barak would be the right person to speak about those issues. And I've been lucky that he accepted my offer to sit down and speak like 4 days, about his role in history and sometimes go very deep, zoom in to the most intimate moment that I choose to put in the film, then to be able to make a zoom out and speak about history in general. And I don't think there is many leaders that have this ability of, like Ehud Barak, this intellectual ability to speak about those events in such an interesting point of view. So I felt that I want to do 2 films about history through, it's so different from my previous three films that I made about places, but for me it's the same in a way. It's not so far away. It's cinematic, it's far away, but if we're talking about why I'm doing these films, for me it's the same. So Barak, it's about a player, about a politician that really trying to change history that will work better for his people, and of course he failed like any good tragedy. And the other one is about The Witness that I've just finished right now, about a photographer that stay in the same event and take documents, take pictures, take images from the same event in the Israeli history.
Oh, and yeah, I just read about that. You just got a grant for that, didn't you?
Yeah, it's from San Francisco.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So So just want to talk about Isaiah Berlin for a minute because it just never comes up that I get to talk about Isaiah Berlin. But so he said that there's the fox and the hedgehog, and the fox knows many things, and the hedgehog knows one big thing. So what do you think Ehud Barak is in terms of that definition?
I asked him that question. It's out of the film because, like, Ehud Barak never, there is no. He's always play with all the balls, so he think he have the both qualities. He don't want to choose which one he is. I think he is a fox. He's definitely fox. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a nice game, and all this question, what if? It's a question with no answers, of course. Nobody know what if. Barak said it very, very beautiful. That's the road that's not taken. It's always the road that's maybe this is the road that's our life will be much more better, and all the problem wasn't there. But there's only one road. There's only one war that we are facing in, and we don't know the alternative. All these metrics that's out there. So the question is, in many ways, it's not relevant because we don't know what if. But for me, it's very, very relevant because it's always. I feel that it's so important to think about the other option. Maybe it helps us in the future to make better decisions.
And how did you approach him? Did you know him before then? I know you are both from kibbutzim. Does that like create a bond when you meet him?
No, not with Ehud Barak, not at all. In Israel, it's a very small in the end, so few phone calls and you can get to anyone. And then those time he was out of politics. He was like retired, right? He working on his English biography. And so on. So I thought maybe it's a good time to speak to him. I didn't know that he would come back to the Israeli politics and become the main opposition to Netanyahu in many areas in Israel. So I felt maybe it's a good time for him to speak honestly about the past and about his roles in the past and about the Israeli project that he spent all his life working for that and what he thinks about it right now. And then I came to him and I threw the idea. Of course, he knew Berlin, he knew Tolstoy, he read all these books. And I think it was a different approach for him to speak about his past, Israeli history, and the same dilemma that any leaders had to face when he need to make difficult decisions.
And how did he feel? He was happy to participate?
It took like almost a year to find time that he will come to the studio. In the end, it's worked out, and he actually sat there like 4 days and speak. I have 20 hours of Ehud Barak speaking. And then I have like another 2 years or a year and a half to cut it to the film. And after 2 years or 3 years, it was supposed to be a premiere in Israel, and then it's canceled because COVID and everything. So they want him in the premiere, and I call him to try to figure out if he can come to the screening, and he said, "Oh, okay, of course I will come." And his wife shouting from the back of the apartment, "Hey, Ehud, you never saw the film. You don't know. How do you look there? So maybe you should watch it before you confirm your presence in the film." He said, "Okay, she was right." And I came to his apartment and screened the film for him. It was interesting. I think he's happy. It's a different way of the way he presents himself in television and in media. So I think he was happy with the film.
But he didn't make any condition that, if he wants you to take something out, you'll take it out or anything like that. He just said, make the movie.
Yeah, just make the movie. Yeah, in this case, he's a different kind of politician. He never watched the Russians. He never watched any rough cut. He made me a favor to watch it before the premiere of the film. He's a different kind of politician, definitely. You can like him, you can dislike him, but you cannot ignore that it's a different one. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it sounds like he's your perfect subject, because I can't think of any other politician who would have given you that freedom. Maybe there are some, I don't know, but it seems unusual.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, and tell me about the structure of the film. When did you come up with the idea of, asking about these 5 questions, and how did you pick those? Or is it 5 the questions that you go over with him?
No, it's more like a 6 or 7, but
Yeah.
it was the main idea for the beginning, because I always need a structure. For me, structure is very, very important, to put everything in some kind of point of view or angle. Otherwise, it could be about anything. And I felt that I want to be there in a 6 important moment, and in some of them, Ehud Barak was like a minor witness, a child in 48, and
Right.
some of them he was a bigger player until he became the main player in the play in Camp David. So I wanted to pick up some very important moment in the history of Israel, that decision had meaning, or not taking decision, it's also kind of decision. And he was there, in different role, like I said. And I have some others, I think, but in this moment, in these places that's in the film, it was much more interesting for me. So it's every one of these chapters is a metaphor or symbolism for something else. It's not just the story, what's happening in 73, what's happening in 48, Arafat stuff, dividing Jerusalem, etc. It always withdraw for Lebanon. It's always a moment in history that you can, when you're looking back, you can think, what if?
What if, right?
Yeah.
So you start out with what if Yasser Arafat, was killed, and then you go to the end of, what if he had made peace, or what if someone, and then you go back to the beginning of, you think, what if someone else had been there then, negotiating for the Palestinians in 2000, right? So it's like bring it all.
Yes, because somehow the history of Israel, it's like a script, it's like a story. It's so, of course, we don't have all the option, but I think this kind of history, it's different because it's developed by ideas, by stories that people told to themselves. So you can choose different route of the plot, maybe, I don't know. So it's interesting to think about it that way. And of course, Arafat is very interesting because, it's like the gun in the first act that shoot in the third act, yeah? And
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so in the end, Arafat destroyed Barak politics career in a way, So it was very interesting relationship between Ehud Barak in the 70s with Arafat and Ehud Barak 2000.
Right. No, and it's just so interesting, just that Barak was there in so many places. He's almost like Zelig, like he was, he just turns up, like, he's here, he's there, now he's prime minister, right? And some of those things, like another one of the what ifs is, what if Rabin hadn't been assassinated? Yeah. And, I don't know, Ehud Barak might have become prime minister, in 1999, but he might not have if Rabin had still been alive, right? So yeah. That was something that you made me think about that never occurred to me really before. So.
Yeah, history is such a big ocean, and we think we can change the waves and we can change it, but it's illusion. Yeah, it's illusion.
Yeah.
And if even if you are the president of United States, you can fall down because small virus came suddenly from nowhere and change everything. So we don't know nothing about reality, and we think we're smart, we think we're intelligent, we think we have science, But in the end, um, even if we're speaking about the past, the way we understand the past changing all the time, and you know, it's more about the present than about the past. So it was interesting to think about all these Berlin ideas, Tolstoy ideas, through the eyes of Israel and through the chronic history of the state of Israel.
And yet at the same time, with all the, you know, the big ideas and the philosophy and the, you know, looking at history, you also get these sort of small moments that are very personal. That's something that, you know, you don't see a lot of from Ehud Barak. You know, he doesn't talk about himself a lot. I was really interested in that moment when he is talking about how on the kibbutz there was a woman who would take a loaf of bread every day, and he asked his father, and his father explained to him that she was a concentration camp survivor. And I thought that his reaction to that was so interesting, where he said, I realized that there was this whole other world that I knew nothing about outside the kibbutz, because there were so many different ways that you could have interpreted that story, I mean, as a child. But his way was that, you know, that there was knowledge that he didn't have that he wanted to understand more. You know, I don't know, I thought it was very revealing. Did you have that?
Yeah, it's a child memory, but it's also, for me, it's understanding of Ehud Barak as a child, that he not understand nothing. You know, he stay in a very safe place and small place, everybody know, but there's so much going around him that can be destroyed, this very safe and family moment, and nothing would be the same. So I think this moment for him and in the film represent how fragile everything, and how we don't know what would be next week, next month, maybe in the next few years. And that's why I have, it was touching, it was emotional moment in the film, but it also said something about the whole idea of speaking with Ehud Barak about history. And he became very emotional every time he speak about his father. There is a very strong relationship between him and his father. It's very interesting to see that.
Yeah, and I was wondering, he also, you get him to talk a little bit about that famous moment in his career that everybody in Israel knows about him dressing up in women's clothes to, you know, but I didn't think he would talk about that. You got him, I don't see him talking about that a lot. So how did you, was he open to telling that story? Because it's such a funny
Yeah,
story.
I think he tell this story many times in the same way. So actually, this kind of dialogue about Beirut was like many other times spoke about it. Nothing new.
Okay.
But it came for me. It was important in the decision to kill your enemy, kill or not you kill your enemy. So this kind of story that Israel, the way Israel think about power and how to use power, and if this is the right way of thinking about power and violence, you know, if you finish the film, you can see what is the history of Israel. It's one violence event, another one, and then another one, then another one, then another one, and you cannot stop thinking if this is the only way to run history and to run the story of a nation. And I think Beirut and the way Ehud Barak so enjoying speaking about it, it's also kind of example of the relationship between Israel and the nation in the Middle East. And Ehud Barak, he was very honest, you know, and he said it's a revenge. Sometimes you need to revenge. It's not just you know, it's sometimes you need to go to this very Asian feeling, and so it was interesting to listen to him, because sometimes he's much more honest than other Israeli politicians. You know, like he said that if he was born as a Palestinian, what if, yeah? He probably will join one of the resistance movement, one of the terror organization, and fight against the Israelis. So any other politician will dare to say that?
I don't think so, but did that surprise you? And tell me if there were moments where when you were speaking to him, you were really surprised, where he just, completely went against what you expected him to say, if that happened.
Barely, because I read so much about him, and I watched any interview he made in his life, and I read like thousands of interviews that he made. So I knew a lot about what he wanted to say and how he wanted to say. And of course, in this kind of meeting, Ehud Barak have his interest, he wanted to influence his legacy, of course. So I was really aware what his point of view in any one of these questions that they want to refer to him. I think I was a little bit surprised about the emotion of childhood that he had, about his relationship with his father. It was charming for me and very, 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 it touched my heart. I think the way he speak about 73 war, Yom Kippur War, also was very interesting for me, how he analyzed the relationship of power between the Israeli and the Egyptian forces. And Israeli always speak about Yom Kippur in the end as a great victory, but Ehud Barak is honest enough to see the whole picture and to try to understand what Sadat wanted to achieve and who achieved, and yet in the end, Sadat, the result of this war, it was almost 100% what Sadat wanted to do in 73. So all this question of how you kind of story you tell to yourself about history, it was interesting for me in 73 when he spoke about 73.
Yeah.
So
and how he talked about that the real advantage, the reason that Israel won the 6-day war was not necessarily the great strategy, but because of acting first.
Yeah.
Right. And the reason that the losses were so high in the Yom Kippur War was, not being attacked, not acting first. Right. So that's and it's just not the conventional wisdom that you hear. Right.
Yeah. From the Israeli side.
Definitely. From the Israeli side, yeah. Yeah,
and also about Lebanon, how difficult for a leader to admit that you spent 18 years with achieving nothing, and now you need to say, okay, I lost, I need to go back. There's nothing for me to stay here. And to admit in front of his audience, his people, and from the people all over the Middle East, say, okay, we made a mistake, and it's a huge one, and now we need to withdraw. It's a very difficult moment for a leader. You need to be very strong to admit and make this kind of action.
It's true. It's very rare. And it kind of makes me think of what just happened with the US withdrawing from Afghanistan. Like, he should have given them a lecture on how to do that, and how to cut your losses, because that's what he was doing.
Yeah, it's the same story. US spent so much money and so many people died there for nothing. Now it's the same. It's like 18 years later, and it's the same situation, same people ruling, same human rights. Nothing changed, just billions of dollars, and many people lost their life for both sides. So you ask yourself, why?
Yeah, well, I think he projected a certain, his incredible self-confidence and strength. I think that he was able to make that move in 2000. And, I think outside of Israel, I think a lot of people in the world don't even realize that there still were Israeli troops in Lebanon up to 2000. We know about it, but in America, I don't think it's so widely known, and it was really, it couldn't have been easy for him to do that. And
yeah, he has a very strong sense of history. I think he and Netanyahu, they both feel that they play role in the history of the Jewish people, the history of the Israeli state. And that's why it's so interesting to listen to them if they really want to share,
Yeah. And When did you actually sit down with him and record this this interview?
I think the first session was in the end of 16, and the second one was in the end of 18. Something
Okay.
like that, yeah.
And at that time, you didn't have any idea that he was going to go back into politics the way he did in 2019?
Yeah, I felt it in 17 and 18, but I decided to
Yeah.
end the film in 2000. I didn't want to go, I really want to speak about the past and not about the present in a way. I don't want to interrupt with all this Netanyahu stuff and his relationship with the Netanyahu families. I really want to be able to look about history and without the distraction of the current politics of the state of Israel, that it's so, crazy in many ways. That's why I felt that Camp David would be the end of the film. So I didn't want to go to all these ideas about the present and about the future. He had a lot to say about it, and he writes in the Israeli newspaper, in Haaretz, and sometimes New York Times. But I want this feeling that we're looking back and thinking about present.
Because I remember that when he announced in 2019 that he was forming this party, that he was joining with this party, I mean, a lot of people were very, very optimistic, that, once he's back, now the opposition to Netanyahu, we're going to win this election. But he was back for the September 2019 election, right? That was the one that he was there for.
The Israeli don't like him in the end. They don't trust him and don't vote for him. It was a surprise or not surprise, but it seemed that I have no place right now in the Israeli politics. And he will be 80 in February.
Yeah, well, so kind of that was his moment to make the comeback, right? Because for the third election, he didn't
participate.
Yeah, he didn't participate. Yeah. So, I remember being surprised because I thought that, everyone says they want to, so many people were saying they want to get rid of Netanyahu. And then where, he was so much more, he was much more experienced and credible than anybody else who was opposing Netanyahu. And yet he didn't seem to have a big impact on the result.
But his support from outside very strongly with the opposition to Netanyahu in many ways. And he was like one of the leader of the opposition on this powerful demonstration. And so I think he played interesting role in the opposition to Netanyahu without taking any formal position. That's maybe was very smart from his side. And when he see there's no place for him in the Israeli politics, I think he chose to try to act from outside. That's what he did. But
it was just a kind of an interesting chapter, that I think that, just didn't go the way that a lot of people were expecting. And that's kind of the last time that I saw a lot of him, now he comments on TV, but let's just talk about sort of the last, the last 15, 20 minutes of the movie, a little about the Camp David, because, that seems like, look, I was just thinking about it, after I saw it again, and just, Clinton and Barak together, that they couldn't, that they'll never be, I don't think they'll ever be like stronger negotiator as a US president than Clinton, because he was able to do Oslo. And, it just seemed like, such a incredible moment that things could have changed so much then.
I think it's a very sad moment of the history of the region. But for me, it was an important lesson how the old myths still control our life. In the end, at least this is this is the way I present the failure of the Camp David summit. Everything is failed on Jerusalem, not just Jerusalem, this very small part in Jerusalem, the holy places. Who will control the holy places? It's amazing. Think about it. these two nations continue to fight and die because they are not willing to compromise and find reasonable solution about this, I don't know, 100 dunam, 100 acre, I don't know how long, the size of the holy place in Jerusalem, the Al-Aqsa and the Kotel HaMaravi, the West Wall. It's amazing that reasonable people are still occupied with very old mythology and myths and cannot beat them. It's stronger than us in many ways. And it's actually closed the old argument about history and about the ability of people to change the course of history. And Clinton and Barak failed, it was bigger than them.
Well, I mean, I think though, it's interesting is that, you see how brilliant Barak is, how intellectual he is, but maybe he, because he was so intellectual, he didn't really understand the religious passion that was at the bottom of this for everyone. I mean, I was thinking that maybe even if Arafat had agreed, there could have been a no confidence vote and the whole thing could have fallen apart, right?
Of course. Yeah.
If Arafat had agreed, that's a big
yeah.
if, a big what if.
Yeah, it's a big question. And when the time for nation this is the time for them to make peace. Many historians try to answer this question. When is the right time? And I guess 2000, unfortunately, wasn't the right time for the Jewish and the Palestinians to make some kind of solution for these 100 years of war.
And yet, what was it, 3-4 years after that, Arafat died. So, so if it were really he who was the big obstacle, you think that there would have been peace by now, since,
So it's bigger than Arafat, it's bigger than Clinton, it's bigger than Ehud Barak and Netanyahu.
Apparently.
Very, very powerful forces there that don't, it's amazing and it's sad and tragic, but I guess Arafat wasn't the obstacle. I think the mythology of this place, the mythology of the Palestinians, the mythology of the Jewish people, this is the main problem. We need to solve the story and then maybe we'll be able to make peace between the nations, maybe.
Well, it seems also, Arafat was, driven by emotions, or, his supporters were very emotional. He was able to, always get people out to, demonstrate for, whatever was going on. And Barak had support, but he isn't someone who, sort of commanded passionate following like that in the same way, right? It's not a cult of personality with him. He was the right person for the job, right? Yeah.
Much more than that. It's what is the utopia of the Palestinian people, and what is the utopia for the Zionists? It's I think this is the main questions.
It's sort of two conflicting narratives that haven't been resolved yet, but your movie raises so many questions that are really interesting to think about. And I know that after we stop talking, I'm going to have 10 other questions that I forgot to ask.
You can call me every time.
Okay. But is there anything else that you want to tell people about the making of the film, or?
No, just I would like to thank to Miami Jewish Film Festival for the opportunity to screen this film. I hope next time will be in person.